Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it's Tuesday. It's April 5th. This will be our chart listing for the day. And I thought I'd start out by showing you the daily chart. You can see here that it looks like we're going to get at least a two-legged correction at a minimum. It could be that we just come back here, make a measured move back to the midline, relieve some of this overbought pressure, and we're able to go higher. But we could continue lower. But at this point, I would say prices are at least going to try to attempt two legs back, and a measured legs back to right about here. We get a measured leg back. So we'll just have to see what happens and where we go from here. So we'll see what tomorrow brings. But let's flip over and look at the daily or the intraday. Okay, you can clearly see there's a large two-tiered channel. The problem here is the big blue channel didn't really help you at all. It's doubtful you could probably find it until you've got these two swings. And then you can clearly see the midlines playing in there all the way down, starting even back here. So I believe this to be valid, but it's just not a channel that really helps you. You really have to narrow down and get into this shorter term stuff. And this was kind of interesting here because we got this channel working down. We get a break and we get three legs to a new low. But if you look, the measured move, if you get a measured move off the width of that channel, that's exactly where we turned down. And then we broke higher, and then we still made a new low here and then worked sideways. So maybe this is a two-tiered channel that didn't start normally, or maybe that's just a measured move over. It's hard to say. Clearly the yellow channel is correct. It's just the key is this a trend line or is that a midline? And maybe it's a midline. And if it is, this is the way oops. Let's start over here. It would look more like that. And then there's your channel, and you can clearly see that's a midline. So I don't know which one's right. It's hard to know. But to me, it looks like it's probably correct like this. So that's a really hard channel to find. Always once you get a break, do your measured moves just to see what happens. And if nothing happens, just remove it. Pretty simple. And sometimes that'll give you a great setup. Unfortunately, we didn't get a signal bar there. There's a bunch of great moves. We had this whole move down here. We had another one here and another one here, and there's no way to get into any of those. There's no decent setup unless you wanted to be a little aggressive. There's just no way to get in them. There's still plenty of trades here today to get you 2 or 3 trades, but it was a little bit, it was slim pickings for such great moves not to be able to have a setup of any kind. And you get days like that. So if you struggled today to find a trade, it's because there's just no setups in that. The prices just turned and went down. This could have been news driven. We had a news item that came out at 9 o'clock, that's 9:01, so 9 o'clock's right in here, and it shot up to begin with, and then boom, it just sold off. And so, they'll write the news to fit the price action, so it doesn't really mean anything. But maybe this was a news item. But generally, if it's a news item, it'll take it back pretty quickly, and we didn't do that today. So I just think the market was going to correct regardless. So, but let's zoom in, and we'll go through these trades real quickly, and we'll wrap today up. But early on, where prices are dropping down, we make a low. We actually get a two-legged correction here. So this is a second entry short. It's not a perfect signal bar. It's close to closing in its bottom 1/3. It's right there on the borderline. If you took this trade and felt it was good enough, I wouldn't argue with you, but I think the signal bar is questionable. That's the problem. It needs to close another tick or two lower to really feel comfortable about it. But it's 2 legs back, and it's a second entry short, and we're looking for a retest of the lows, which you can see we get a couple of legs down, and it rallies out of there. Perfect price action, really. But if you waited a few more minutes later, you get a first entry and then a second entry. Now, as a second entry, that signal bar is not good enough, but it's also a first entry, second entry. So it's a failed second entry long and a second entry short all together. And there's really kind of a double top there, quadruple top almost. So there's other reasons to take that trade when we're still looking for a new low. I like that one. And it's borderline too. It's close to being able to say, hey, that's a little aggressive. But if you see everything I just described, you probably want to take that trade. And of course, we run down to a new low and we bounce out of there. Unfortunately, you get nothing on the way up. Your failed second entry short is here, but that doesn't set up properly for a reversal. So, and it's a little outside the trend line there, so it's a little hard to say if that, it's just not a failure that you usually want to take. So, I didn't mark it. And of course, you do. It's hard to say if you get a close outside there. It looks like most people thought we did, and then you get a correction and a run to a new high, and then it sells off. And this is mostly sideways here. I just don't think you want to enter in that. It's too congested. And you can clearly see that. I don't see anything there I would want to trade. And of course, we do break out and push lower. And we got this channel coming down. We get a close outside and move to a new low, and then we get a higher low. So I like that one just to try to ride it back up. You're still looking for your retest of this high. We haven't really made it yet. And we get that right here. And unfortunately, this thing just reverses and it's gone. There's a lower high right here. Notice that it does come back and test the close from yesterday, which is an important price level. And you can see there's been support and resistance across there. And this actually broke higher and turned down. It didn't get back to the trend line. It didn't get back to the EMA. It's a little, it's really tempting to want to take that trade, but it's rare that a trade from here goes this far. So it's just not worth the risk. That's a rare setup. So if you were thinking about that trade, which I could see why you would, because I was thinking about it as well, but I decided, hey, it's not following the rules. I will not take that trade. And then you watch it go without you, and you say, well, see, I knew I should have taken that, but you can't. That's the one thing you got to guard yourself from. Because next time you'll do this exact same thing, and guess what will happen? It won't run down like this. It'll trap you in and go higher. So if you follow the rules, most of the time you'll save yourself from some really bad losses. And of course, we run on down, we get our first break, and you get a first entry, and then you try to go higher. So when it breaks lower there, it's a second entry short. It's a little congested. It is the second entry, and we're looking for, and I mean, that's a really strong move down, so we're looking for a retest. This is one that's borderline. You could almost call this red, but I just think that congestion across there. And without being back to the EMA, you're just kind of in no man's land there. I think you got to be really careful there. So I just marked it green. And you can see it continue to go sideways. It did end up going lower. You definitely don't want to enter out here because it just continues to go sideways, and you don't know that it's going to drop and go lower like that. So, I mean, it's just one of those days where you don't get a lot of really good setups. And then finally you make a new low here. You get a few legs down to a new low, and then you just start kind of working sideways. But you can see this one's kind of interesting. Normally I would tell you to wait on a lower high before entering here, since it's made a breakout in a new high compared to the previous highs across here. And you can see that. And so generally you'd want to wait on a lower high, but let me show you this. And if you saw this, notice there's a leg up. So there's the first leg, and then there's a two-legged correction to the downside, and then there's a second leg up. So technically, that's a second entry short. It's a little more advanced. You really need to know what you're doing here. But the market tends to move in twos. And so if you see that triple test with a bearish bar and you realize that, hey, there's a leg up, there's two legs up with a two-legged correction in the middle, that's generally the center of the pattern. There's a good chance we're going lower. And I mean, most breakouts fail. The overall bias is down. So if you see that, I like that trade. If you don't see that, then you probably wouldn't want to take this trade. You'd want to wait on a lower high. And that doesn't come till here. And there's no room to scalp out, so you can't take that trade. And it would have worked, but you don't know that in advance. And of course, it breaks out and fails. Tries to go lower once, twice. And I marked this one blue. This is not a true failure, but you could argue that it's a triple test across. We actually tested that multiple times with multiple bars, but it's, you can see the support held there. It closed inside the support 1, 2, 3, 4, and then broke lower a third time and failed and went out. So I don't think I would wait till here to go long, but if you wanted to trade that on an engulfing bar when it broke higher right there, we're probably going to the other side. So I'm sure they trap shorts right there. And this turns out to be a great move. That's the one move you could catch today. And yeah, that's congestion, but the reason it's congested is because prices are trying to go lower and they can't. And the direction that we should be going is up anyway because we failed on the breakout. So prices should try to come back up and test the high side again. And you can see that they trap so many shorts, it just takes off. And then again, it turns down and there's just no chance to trade this. You could consider that a breakout pullback, but I'd wait on a second entry and you don't get one. You drop on down. You could argue that's a second entry. It looks like 2 legs back, but it's so close to the trend channel line. I'm really leery of that one. But it finally comes back here, and even though this does not make a new high, it's still 3 attempts to go higher. It's such a bearish bar. It's right off the key entry point. So I don't know that I would just go short right there. I might let it break lower and drop a limit order in. And you could have gotten a pretty good feel on this, at least a couple of ticks back, maybe more than that. Depends. I can't remember exactly how far it came back before it drops on down. And you can see this is the danger of going short down here after you're bouncing. But when you consistently turn down off that line, going back and forth, you pretty much, at some point it's going to fail, but it's hard to turn that down with such a bearish bar, especially if you get a chance to enter on a limit order, which you would have here, and then we bounce and go straight the other way. And unfortunately, you don't get a setup on the retest. Or if you, depending on how you look at it, if you look at it like we're looking at it now, then that's the trend line. But you don't get a second entry. So this is not even a signal bar. This is. So you can't take that trade. And you could say, hey, we got a lower high here, but that's just moved really much too far to consider that a lower high. Wait and see if you get something else. And then you get a failure with a big bearish bar, and it's also a first entry, second entry. Now, on a second entry, it's really close, but this has been a downtrend day, and this is a failed second entry long. It's a big bearish bar. I like that one. You can see it didn't take long. It was a pretty quick trade. And it just continued to go lower all the way back to the lower side again where it bounces. And notice how it can't get back to this line here. It's shooting through the EMA, but it's not getting back here. So anyway, you do get a second entry here, but that looks too congested. And you can see how it bounces, and it could have run up, and you're expecting it to try to get to here and make a new high. So it's just not a good short. It drops on down irregardless, but it's just not a good setup. And then you make 2 legs back here. This one is kind of tricky. There's a second entry short right here that you might have gotten sucked into. If you look, it's mostly sideways, so to me it just looks like a breakout, a higher breakout. Let me draw. I didn't draw it on here, but if you draw this, you can clearly see there's congestion there. And so to me, it just looks like a breakout of congestion. And in this case, it was a higher breakout. So wait on the lower high. That's about the only thing that would keep you out of that. And you get the lower high here, but there's no real setup. It's an engulfing bar. And if you wait till it breaks out here, you don't really have enough room. So yeah, it could maybe go lower. But if this is truly going sideways, you just don't have much room there. And instead it breaks higher. And then you get a triple test across here. And this is actually a first entry, and then it turns down. This actually makes a tick or two lower and then turns back up and on this engulfing bar. Again, I do not know if I would wait till way up here to go long. I mean, that bar is 23 ticks. You probably want to trade this on the engulfing bar because the trap really triggers right here when it breaks above this bar. And I guarantee you they had the shorts trap right there. And you could tell by how that rockets up like that. So I like that one. We were overdue for a bounce and we got it there. And that's another nice move up. And then of course you don't get another chance to trade this thing and it just the bottom falls out of it again. It's a shame that we couldn't get better entries on that. But it just didn't happen. And then we just kind of chopping sideways here. It's too congested. Don't try to enter in that. I wouldn't try to go long or short until you finally push higher and you get a lower high here. And look how bearish that bar. Those are 2-bar matching highs, so you can use either one of them. This one's so bearish, and that one's really bearish, but this one's even worse. So it shows you the sellers are coming back, and you're expecting prices to test this low here. And even if there's a range, there's a good bit of, actually this would have been more like that. And so there's plenty of room there regardless. And there's actually a reversal here, but I don't think you have enough room there, and you don't know this is going to break lower. In fact, I like going long right here because you've got a triple test across there. This is really looks like a congestion, so 2 legs down. So you could look at that as a second entry, but it's a chance to get long at the very low. It's a little aggressive because it's a new low. It's lower than that. So maybe you wait on the higher low, which comes here. You just have to make sure you got enough room there. So you may have to let that one break higher. Otherwise, you'd have to skip that. I mean, I probably should make that one green, to be honest. But what you'd want to do is probably let this break higher and drop your limit order a tick or two back. And I know you could have gotten filled on it. And just to make sure you got room. And then we turn back down. You get another nice bearish bar after a triple test, but you don't have any room there. And then, of course, the bottom falls out again, and you got nowhere to enter. And that just kind of takes you into 2:30. I mean, there wasn't much this afternoon. After lunchtime, I mean, that second entry short right there, I mean, that's really a double bottom, so that's a second entry short. And it's a failed breakout. It's a lower high on the failed breakout. I mean, there's a lot, and it's just such a great signal bar. So I really like that setup. These others are, I mean, you got 2 more iffy ones here. And you got a nice move down, but just no way to really get into it. And you wouldn't want to try to pick any bottoms down here. So it's just, that's too dangerous. So, but anyway, not the greatest trading day, a little convoluted, kind of tough to read. You really need to be a good chart reader to read this kind of a day. And I didn't mention it, but there were 2 measured legs down. You can see that took it. We ended up going a little further, but we came back and just kind of found resistance at that original spot. So we got a little oversold down here as the day went on, but that would have been a great target if you did catch any shorts up here by chance. But that's how I saw it. So again, I'm not going to drag this on anymore. I'm going to wrap it up. We'll be back again to do it tomorrow. I'm done for today. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.